This program is made possible in part by the WKNO Partners in Excellence Fund, committed to presenting quality programming, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Well, all you have to do is walk into any bookstore and you will see that many, many books have been written about the life of Elvis Presley. But one aspect of his career that has seldom been touched upon was his deep and abiding and lifelong love of gospel music. We're fortunate enough to be joined today by a man who was right by Elvis's side, singing, performing gospel music for many years. He has been a part of many gospel groups, including the Harmoniers and the Imperials. Join me, Bonnie Corvellis, for a conversation with Joe Moscheo.
He touched me, and now I am no longer the same.
Joe, thank you so much for being here today.
It's great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
It's amazing reading your book is to wonder how can a young Italian boy end up singing gospel music with Elvis Presley. So tell us about yourself.
Wow, yeah, I was, my folks came from the old country, we say, and settled in Albany, New York. And I graduated from, this date me, of course, but I graduated from high school in 1955, and Elvis was on the radio. And of course, you know, living in upstate New York, it's a long way from Memphis, Tennessee, but in 10 short years, in 1965, I was in Nashville in the recording studio working with Elvis. Now, how does that happen? I really have no idea, but I was so fortunate, really.
I mean, I can understand being touched by Elvis. So many people of so many ages heard him on the radio, they loved his music, but Southern gospel?
Yeah.
I mean, how did that draw you in?
Well, my father wanted me to take piano lessons, and I did. And when I went to school in the South, in Florida, and I was going to be a music teacher. But on the weekends, I started playing the piano for a gospel quartet. And I had no idea what the gospel quartet was all about, but they, you know, gave me a quick review of it. And I got pretty good at it. I went to a few concerts. And then I was offered a job with a professional quartet, a full-time traveling quartet. And I was the piano player, and there were 4 singers. And we happened to come to Memphis in the early 60s. And I was hanging around backstage, and I heard the buzz that Elvis was coming backstage because he's home. And he lives in Memphis, and he's going to come backstage because he loves quartet singing. And so I hung around until about 11:30 that night, and he walked in. It was just...
But he must have been barely older than you were.
He was a couple years older than I was.
Yeah. But you were really intimidated
by
meeting
goodness.
him?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, because even at that time, he was huge. I mean, he was the biggest thing of our generation. I mean, it was not only his music and his, you know, you could hear him on the radio all the time, but he had made several movies by that time. And, you know, he was just he was bigger than any artist that we had known at the time. Of course, the Italian people up in upstate New York, you know, they always went for Perry Como and, you know, Frank Sinatra. Dean Martin, of course. You know, but Elvis, you know, we watched him on TV on the Ed Sullivan Show when they would only shoot him from the waist up because he, you know, they thought his gyrations were a little vulgar at the time compared to what's going on today, you know. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, especially when you know anything about Elvis, people who knew him personally like you did, the picture that comes through, he wasn't this wild, degenerate, you know, that he was actually hurt to be labeled like that because he actually was a nice Southern boy that wanted to sing gospel music.
Exactly. I mean, he felt it, you know, and he, I guess the other guys, you know, would smoke a cigarette and stand there and sing, and he just felt the music and he wanted to move, you know, and it wasn't intended to be vulgar at all, but I guess he was mistaken. But anyway, he showed up that night backstage at the Ellis Auditorium in Memphis, Tennessee, and I got up enough courage to go up and ask him for an autograph. It was so embarrassing, really. I told him it was for my mother.
You didn't want to admit that it
No,
was for you?
No. And he looked at me and he said, "Hey, you're Joe Moscheo." He said, "You play the piano for the Harmoniers, don't you?" I said, "Yeah, how did you know?" He said, "Oh, I know all the quartets and all the singers and the piano players." And he said, "I'll tell you what, I'll give you my autograph if you give me your autograph."
That's a nice thing to do.
Wasn't it nice? It's so, I think he sensed I was way over my head, you know, and he wanted me to relax and enjoy myself, and he just could sense it. He was very sensitive to that. So.
It sounds also, too, what you bring out in your book is that when he was growing up, he was kind of in awe of them.
Yeah. Back then, he would follow the quartets around. He would go to, if they were singing at a church or if they were singing in a high school auditorium, he would show up, you know. And he wanted to be a quartet or a gospel singer, and it just so happened that he had made a recording at Sun, you know, for his mother, and then the rest is history. He could have gone either way, but there's one of those examples where, you know, the fork in the road, he took the right one, I think.
Tell me about, because at the same time that he made that record, he had auditioned for a gospel. That's a story that I had never heard, that he almost could have joined a gospel group. Tell me about that.
Yeah. There was in Memphis, Tennessee, there was one of the most famous gospel quartets who lived here. They're called the Blackwood Brothers Quartet. He was a big fan of the Blackwood Brothers, and they had what we call now a farm club of young singers who would develop, and if they ever needed a replacement in the group, then they would call up one. So there was an opportunity for him to be a part of the farm club, you know. And so he did audition, and he was waiting for the answer to his audition when all of a sudden he's on the radio with this song that he recorded, and his career took off, and he really never had a chance to do the other.
You have to wonder if he would have been happier had it gone the other direction, because you describe how he would do a concert, and then after the concert, all he wanted to do was sing gospel songs in his hotel room for hours and hours and hours with you.
It seemed like the gospel music was a part of his life, and it was part of his whole persona. It never left him. It was important to him because his mother instilled it in him. I mean, he went to church. He learned all these songs. His record collection was mostly of gospel music and gospel singers. He was a student of the business. He knew everyone, what part they sang, the words to all the songs. You know, he studied it. I mean, he loved it. And whenever we had an opportunity, he always wanted to sing a gospel song. And he would break into some spiritual or some hymn, and then we would just get around him and start, you know, singing or humming behind him or whatever. And then when he became very popular in the Las Vegas years, we would go to his suite in the hotel and sing all night. But usually it was he was showing off his music to some friends who would, you know, a lot of movie stars and singers, pop singers would come to the shows in Vegas, and then he would invite them upstairs, and somewhere during the night, or 3 or 4 in the morning, he'd say, "Let's get around the piano, I want you to hear these guys sing." And that was the cue, so we'd all get around the piano, and then he'd sing, and then sometimes they would like to sing. There's a picture in the book of Mama Cass. She just couldn't believe the sound. And she said, "Can I sing one with you?" And she sang Amazing Grace, and we backed her. That was a big thrill for her, but it was a bigger thrill for us, really.
That song was one of the ones that meant a lot to him.
Yes.
Amazing Grace. And another one was Peace in the Valley. And you recount that story. If you've ever seen this clip, you just can't forget it, of him on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Yeah.
And he held firm. He said he was going to sing a gospel song for his mother. And I think you're correct. You say Ed Sullivan is visibly rattled, sort of introducing him. He's a little uncomfortable, and he says that he wants to end world hunger or something to kind of set it up, when actually he just wanted to sing a gospel song.
Yeah. The story is that Jordan Ayers were there with him, and they said that he actually had an argument with the producer who wanted him to sing his latest hit. And he said, "No, I promised Mama that I would sing a gospel song, and that's what I'm going to do. And he sang Peace in the Valley, and you're right, Ed Sullivan didn't, he said in his own genre or something, I mean, he said some remark that you could tell he was
because he didn't really know how to set that up, or
Right.
why Elvis would want to sing a Southern church song, you know. What do you think it is about that music? Maybe was it just that he grew up in the South, or what was it about that music that was so unforgettable to him?
Well, you know, there are a lot of theories. My understanding and my theory is that because he became a superstar so fast, I mean, at 18 years old, he was already a big star. He couldn't go to church anymore. He tried one time. I think he went to church here in Memphis, and it caused a big disruption of the service, and you know, the people just wouldn't pay attention to the preacher. He had to leave. And so I think that that his church was gospel music. I think that if he and it kept him grounded, I think, and he really needed it. He drew from it, and it was and I can tell you now, 40 years later, from those Vegas years, we're still traveling. We're doing a lot of dates in Europe, and the people still want to talk about it. But it gives us a chance. It's almost like we're continuing his legacy and his ministry, really. We're singing gospel music to secular people who never heard of gospel music. So it's a great opportunity, really.
You know, Joe, it would have been so easy and I guess logical for you to end up being maybe a crooner type singer, like a Dean Martin or, you know, Frank Sinatra, but what drew you from New York State down into Southern gospel music?
Yeah. Well, as I said, I started playing the piano for a gospel quartet, and they took me to a concert in Pensacola, Florida. And there were the Statesmen and the Blackwood brothers, two of the biggest names back in the 50s and 60s. And the two groups that really, Elvis loved these two groups more than any. In the Statesman Quartet, they were really cool guys. They wore these mohair suits and slicked their hair back, and they all had little pencil-thin mustaches, you know, and black and white wingtip shoes, and real showmen. And that was even their lead singer, a guy named Jake Hess, who started the group, the Imperials. Anyway, Jake was a great singer and a stylist, and it's said that Elvis picked up a few things from Jake. I mean, that's the rumor. And another thing, their bass singer was a big, tall guy they called Big Chief, and he had this twitch in his leg that he would sing, you know, and make all these gyrations. And they think that maybe influenced Elvis too.
He was sort of imitating his idols?
Yeah, he was imitating his idols at the time. Anyway, when I saw these guys perform, and they had this piano player, a guy named Hobie Lister, had black wavy hair, and he would just play and smile with these big teeth, and it was just incredible. And when I saw it, it was hooked. I said, I want to do that. You know, I mean, this is it. So my whole life changed from that time on, because I was going to be a school teacher and kind of be a normal person. But when I saw these guys perform, I said, that's it. I want to do that. And so I just pursued it. And as I did, I got a chance to become a part of the Imperials. Jake Hess left the Statesmen, started a group called the Imperials, and I became a part of that group.
How old were you then? You must have been very young.
Well, yeah, I was probably 30.
When you went to the Imperials?
Yeah.
But you started singing gospel, you were just a
20.
kid.
Yeah, I had put 10 years in before that. Yeah, this is a little later on. Yeah, 1964, 1965.
So what was your first group that you started with then? Tell me about some of the images we're going to see that you've got in the book. Some great pictures.
I have a group called the Harmoniers. It was my first group that I played the piano for in Atlanta. They're the ones that allowed me to meet Elvis backstage. I was playing the piano for those guys at the time. Then I briefly went to a group in Knoxville, Tennessee called the Prophets Quartet. I don't have any pictures of them. But then I went with the Imperials, and that's where it all really started, because then we we started recording in Nashville, doing a lot of backup for recordings, and we get a call from RCA one day and said, Elvis is doing a gospel album, and he wants a choir sound. So we're going to use the Jordanaires, and we'd like to put the Imperials with the Jordanaires, and then we're going to add some female singers, and then we're going to, what they call double it. We're going to stack this, you know, so if there were 12 voices, then you'd stack it or double it, and then there's 24 voices. It sounds like a choir. And so we became a part of that, and that was really our first time to be introduced to Elvis in a working environment where we worked with him in the studio. And he remembered that. He liked us, he liked the way we looked, he liked our sound. And then all of a sudden, it's time to go to Las Vegas in 1969.
You made an really interesting observation in your book. You said nowadays it's not uncommon for a superstar like Bruce Springsteen, for example. He does a folk album, you know, back to his roots sort of thing, and everybody sees that as being, he's stretching, that's so great, that's so edgy. But back then, a superstar of his stature in a place like Vegas in the swinging, 60s, to love gospel music and to choose to bring gospel up on stage with him is really groundbreaking.
It's groundbreaking, and he felt that when these voices were behind him, if you were on stage with him and you could see when he looked over at us out of the corner of his eye, he smiled, he was hearing what he wanted to hear. It gave him inspiration, it gave him the support he wanted, it helped him as a performer with this wall of sound behind him. He loved it, and he was comfortable with it, and he didn't want it any other way. So he had it. He had it with the Jordanaires, he had it with us, he had it with J.D. and the Stamps. He had it his entire career, and we were just happy to be a part of it.
What was that like?
Oh my goodness.
Playing Vegas with Elvis. Tell me, what was it?
It's just bizarre. I mean, it's totally, I mean, you can't even imagine. That's why we, now we're doing what they call the original cast tours in Europe with the original guys that were on stage with them in Las Vegas. There are only, 50 of us maybe totally that were ever performing on stage with Elvis. There's not many of us left, but what a privilege, and what an adventure. I mean, you can say, I'm a professional musician and I've played Carnegie Hall, or I've played the Holiday Inn, whatever, wherever you are. But you've never experienced what it would be like to be on stage with Elvis unless you were there. I mean, it's totally just the most bizarre thing. I mean, we're there working, but we're in awe. We're singing backup, but every moment you're aware that that's Elvis Presley, and we're singing with Elvis Presley, and it's just, it's such a thrill. It's such a privilege, and it was it's overwhelming. I don't even know how to put it in words. But the first night when we opened, we had prepared well. We rehearsed for a month, by ourselves. Then you add the band, then you add all the singers, and then you go on stage with just his band, and then you add the orchestra, and you just keep adding until the show comes together, and then it's opening night. And, we're cool, we're dressed up, we got our little snakeskin shirts on or whatever, and we go out and stand on our platform where we're supposed to be, and the Sweet Inspirations are in front of us, and they start the music, and Elvis walks out on stage. It's like, forget about it. I mean, who knew? I mean, it's like the most amazing thing when the excitement from the audience, and you see the reaction of the people. And when people see Elvis, it's like that sometimes they have palpitations. Some people faint. I mean, really, it's like you can't imagine that this guy has such charisma, and he is so overwhelming. It's just, I don't know how to explain it, but it was very cool. It was a great memory.
You capture some great moments in the documentary. You're one of the producers of the documentary about Elvis's love of gospel music. And when he sings, there are a couple of songs that he just seems transported.
Yeah.
All of you do.
Yeah. there's a song from the '68 special when he was in the black leather suit, you know, and part of that special is he wears a white suit and he sings the song, "If I Can Dream." Oh my God, that to me, I call him the greatest gospel singer because that was a gospel song, and he sang it, and he was so inspired by it. It wasn't just he wasn't just singing the words. Right.
He really felt it. He really meant it.
Oh, he was into it. I mean, you know, he didn't know what was going on around him. If there's cameras, if the lights, he was singing this song with everything he had. I mean, it was the most incredible performance. Yeah, this guy was such an incredible singer. He could sing. His range was incredible. He didn't even know how high he could sing or how low he could sing. He would go for it. He was adventurous. He just went, and if he felt it, he would try to sing it, and he'd do it. And I don't think people realize what a great voice he had. Yeah.
One thing that was really wonderful about reading your book, I've read a lot of Elvis books. A lot of people who grew up in Memphis, who are native Memphians, they know a lot about Elvis, and you can't avoid all these books. It just seems like everybody's written a book about him.
Right.
And of course, so many of those books cover controversial issues. They talk about, you know, his drug use, and it was really interesting. You didn't try to gloss over that sort of thing, but you tried to show a snapshot into what it was like to know the real Elvis, the man, that he really wasn't, you know, just this controversial figure that these other books have talked about.
I certainly would never. I mean, I waited, you know, 30 years to write the book, and I've always wanted to say something about him, and always on the positive side. I certainly don't have anything negative to say about him, because to me he was a great friend. He was very generous. He was, I mean, there are so many stories about how generous he was. I mean, you could, you know, the accounts are out there. He gave so much money away. He would do things for people anonymously. I mean, he didn't even care about if they even knew it was him or not. So, I mean, he was very generous. I think there are a lot of things, positive things. There are too many positive things to say to dwell on anything negative about Elvis. And when I told the story, I had sent the galley to Priscilla, and she read it and called me on the phone and said, "Joe, this is great. I mean, it's about time this has been said." And she said, I said, "Well, would you write a little endorsement for me?" She said, "Oh, I'd do better than that if you would allow me. I'd even write the foreword." I said, "Well, I didn't even want to ask you, you know, I mean." And she said, "Yeah, I'd love to, because everything you said I want to validate, because I was there with him, and I know that all of this is true." So that was a great thing for me. I was very happy about that.
It's hard, I'm sure, for people who were close to him, his daughter, his close friends, to hear only the terrible things over and over. It was really moving to read this book and see that he really was kind of still a country boy at heart in so many ways.
Yeah, that's what I want to dwell on. I mean, the other things are just, I mean, you know, it's rock and roll, you know, it's whatever that is. But as my contention is that Elvis, the real Elvis was the Elvis off stage. He was the little guy from Tupelo and from Memphis, and he loved gospel music. He loved his family. He loved his friends, and he had a great sense of humor. He was just a big jokester, man. The guy was just a regular guy. But he had a job to do, and that was to be Elvis Presley, the superstar. And so he'd get dressed up at night, and he'd go out on stage, and he'd be Elvis Presley, and he'd do his job. But when he walked off stage and went up and took a shower and changed clothes, Tupelo and Memphis showed up. So
that's maybe the most interesting thing. He goes out on stage, he gives the people what they want. He is Elvis, and when he gets off stage, he could go anywhere and do anything for recreation. And what does he do? He sits around a piano with you guys and sings gospel until 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That is amazing.
Yeah,
you know,
that's
that
pretty
goes
bizarre.
to show where his heart must have been all along.
It was a great time for us. I hope it was a great time for him. It was just a wonderful opportunity and a pleasure. and I'm still enjoying it after all these years, really.
So do you think you're going to keep doing this for a while?
I don't think so, Bonnie. I think another year maybe, and then I'm going to let the young guys have it, you know. But I think that there'll always be Elvis fans out there, and I think that part of our responsibility as the old timers is to transfer some of those stories and those feelings about Elvis and about the good things that he did. So,
and that's what you've done
yeah.
today. And
Thank you.
we really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much, Joe Moscheo, for taking time out to talk about the gospel side of Elvis, the side that so few people got to see. Thank you for sharing with us.
Well, thanks for having me, Bonnie. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
This has been a conversation with Joe Moscheo. I am Bonnie Corvellis, and thank you so much for joining us.
The streets of Pearl, you know the mighty, mighty, mighty gates are going high. So wide, so low. You might as well live high. Get wide. I know it's so low. You might as well come
This program is made possible in part by the WKNO Partners in Excellence Fund, committed to presenting quality programming, and by viewers like you. Thank you.